Hi. So it's just as I'm doing this, it's occurring to me that I probably need to get my bangs trimmed. My hair is like kind of nuts right now. So, so this is as close as I get to like gazing into a mirror. So, so a couple things I want to talk about. We're going to read from the basics in the fifth hub, specifically talking and speaking. And what talking and speaking is in the context of all the basics of the hub. So once again, as a reminder, it's like the learning with the hub component of this is learning like the initial development of it, learning kind of the basic components of the hub, and then some of the arising themes that will be kind of like rife for exploration. So the basics that are in this fifth hub that we'll discuss that are part of the Parinama Method book, starting in page 190, talking and speaking, hearing and listening, auditory boundaries, truth, sound, and silence. Silence is going to become, as we ascend through the next three hubs, is a thing. So sound and silence. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that later. So one of the things that is part of this exploration is a revisiting and reconsidering how we were taught to use our voice and really specifically. So it's really the timing per usual. And I don't know if this is a chicken and egg thing, but I went back to the town that I went to high school in, and I guess I kind of like grew up. I also went to college, and um, this hair thing is gonna drive me nuts. It's like it looks like swatting a fly you can't see, but it's like one hair that I can see that is kind of like super there. So I drove into like so you, like you kind of drive. It's like in the middle of nowhere. It's a really small town. Um, and and I was driving in, and the first thing that I passed, there's a couple ways that you can go in, but I think I went in on like Route 2. It's town's called Keene, New Hampshire. And we drove by this fair, or I drove by the fairgrounds, and I have this memory of when I was a little kid, like probably like 10, 9 or 10, and of my dad at the fairground. I think I'd said something like probably, sort of a, I don't know, probably like a mouthy kind of thing in the car. And I remember the windows were open. I remember my father, who was like pretty low key, like didn't have a particularly aggressive personality, like really like taking a hard stand on the fact that I had to like watch what I said. Because he's like, you could get your ass kicked. Very unlike my father to say something like that. But he was like, yeah, you speak up like that to the wrong people and like you could find yourself in trouble. And that had like startled me because I think when at that time, I think the thing I was saying I thought was funny and I thought he'd find it funny. And his reaction startled me that it hadn't been funny to him. He'd actually kind of punished me for it, or at least I'd received a like negative reaction to it. And so part of the thing about this hub is that kind of exploration. Very specifically because like between like 7 and 13 where we're looking at the development of this particular hub where this notion is really being formed about when we like how why the power of it, how it's responded to. A lot of this is like talking and then listening. And it's kind of a call and response kind of thing with creation and communication, which is like, how were we taught? Like, what are some of the core memories that we have about speaking up and how we were told what we were told that means? And the reading in this is like I kind of scanned it a little bit. This is really driving me nuts. I'm sorry. It's like there's just like little hairs here. They're just like a little bit longer. See, like that one. I think we got it. We'll see how long that lasts. But like, so because the thing is it's kind of like the stain of that notion of what it means to speak up is still carried within us on some level, and that's just worth considering, because as we're going to talk about, like the feelings of speaking and the fear of speaking is like, like public speaking, as we'll read about, is like, like for many people, top two fears that they have. And it seems irrational, like to be like, why am I like, why is my heart racing? Why am I so terrified? Why am I terrorized? It's objectively like a safe environment where the biggest thing you can do is embarrass yourself. Or like kind of look dumb, lose status, misspeak, like whatever. Like, but but the thing, so it's kind of like, if you look at the fear of public speaking, and it's like, it's like, oh, I'm scared to be up on that stage. It's like, why? Like, why? It's like, okay, so it's people you don't know, you know. And specifically, why would we be afraid to speak to people that we can't clock? So, a big thing about public speaking is that you're addressing an audience that you actually can't calibrate to. Like, you're just addressing an audience. So, there is no kind of shifting to be what, like the exercise of sort of casing somebody and being acceptable to them, or, being like, oh, I think this is what this person will like, and like kind of adjusting to that, there's a little bit of that you can do, but just that notion that, like that speaking would arise such, like a visceral feeling of dread. And so, and so I'll talk about my own experience here. Was as I drove around the town, I went and I was kind of like, oh, I'll just take a little tour, because my friend I was meeting wasn't going to be able to meet me for another hour or so. And I kind of planned on wanting to drive around. And it was kind of like all of a sudden I started, like, because I was tuned into it, I was like, oh, I was looking at all these places where I was like, where people, it's a small town, and it's a small town. And I thought, God, this is like a tour of all these places where I was like, all these places where people told me to either like shut the fuck up, or I'd get my ass kicked, or shut up, or I'd never amount to anything. Like, those were like the two things where I remember growing up, there were like really consistent themes, which are like, you're either going to get yourself in trouble, which was, I think I'm lucky that that was overtly stated to me repetitively, because it's not hard to trace back that that was something that was like a very consistent message for me. I mean, consistent, and I mean consistent, you know. It was like funny, because it was like we passed the fairground, and then there was like, it was just like there was like a restaurant I'd worked at where I was like, oh yeah, the owners had like told me, to stop speaking up about the stuff that they were doing that was unfair to people. Like, it just, and I was like, yep, there's that. And just, it was kind of like this tour of this kind of notion, this kind of thing that I guess is, hadn't really occurred to me, is like how it was like so consistent in my life. So it's me. And the other thing was, is that, people were always kind of cautioning me that if I didn't learn how to, I mean, they still do it. It's not just there. It's like people still tell me, and I'll say, so I don't want to make this about me here. I just want, like, I want to use this as, let me see. Okay. Here's how I can flip this, or I can get this a little bit, kind of more robust, is the thing about this thing about protecting yourself by not speaking up It's kind of like at face value, it's like, oh, that's good advice about how to operate in the world. So, it's kind of like, oh, well, I mean, it's not untrue. It's not untrue. I mean, like, let's face it. Um, if you can start conflict and, you know, there's that. Or you can offend people and get yourself in trouble and interfere with your, like life. Like it's a fact, like it is, it's accurate to it in a way. Um, and I guess the thing I want to point out here is like, sort of like, why is it like what is like what's happening here that is being um activated. So, in many cases, it's like speaking up interrupts the status quo. And so interruption of sort of like the, things being able to remain as they are. There certainly are folks who it's just easier if it's never spoken of, right? When the world, so like, so I'll use the example of traveling just down the road to this restaurant where there are these two um, male hyper masculine, I won't give too many details here, owners that were, and I'd speak up about thinking, things people weren't being treated well. And and you think about like, and that was like levied back on me as me being the problem, which is I'm fine with. But and also just being mouthy in general, being funny. Back to being funny. Pointing out the, pointing out things out, where it's like kind of inconvenient to point out. So the thing is, it's kind of like because there are people, it's just a lot easier. This stuff never gets pointed out. And it's kind of and it's an interesting thing where it's like by pointing it out, you kind of become the perpetrator of it because it didn't it's like it lives in a way where it doesn't exist if it doesn't get spoken of. So it's like, so you're the person that's summoning it into existence in a way. And that's where the kind of like persecution for speaking up happens. So very much kind of like the stack of TPM here and the exploration of it is that it's kind of, like where it's like the sense of trust and physical security and where we're embodying it in our felt physical sense, not looking at the world as being a way that validates this and that, and therefore like a like highly destabilized internal sense of self. And then, it's like, emotional regulation, sense of power sense of individuality, and then security in your relationship with yourself as a, and then as an extension of that belonging connection in there. And now that like that foundation existing for the security, the emotional regulation, because it's also, we don't want to be like blasting off. Like there is a kind of thing to this, which is yeah, I mean, maybe sometimes we want to be, but like in general, like being, having some aspect of emotional regulation and attunement with folks in a particular way. There's a lot of nuance in that. But just, and then even just sense of power, personal power, just for all of that to be at least somewhat intact in order to feel safe enough to speak. And this is, I'm going to circle this back to public speaking. Because if we have these layers of foundation, and then we can notice that the fear of public speaking is very somatic. It's not rational. it's like you want to talk about the kind of tangle, the parinoma tangle. It's like these reflexes, and then there's belief systems that are tied to them that rationalize what's arising, but it's like physical feelings of anxiety and maybe like, heart rate, tightness in chest, throat constriction. Some people have to pee a lot. Like, and even just that this creates like a where it's harder to think and speak freely, like because there's constriction, that this is somatic. And when it has that somatic quality to it, this is where it's like, yeah, this is a programmed reflex that's been impacted by an early experience. So we're teasing this out, and this can be like kind of difficult. I mean, especially, as far as whether we learned very early on to just like not say anything by seeing it happen to other people, that happens, or if we learned it directly from ourselves. And I have early memories of trying to say funny things and them accidentally tripwiring something that shouldn't be spoken of and being met with like very swift retaliation. So I have a thing where it's like that somaticness of my speaking is something that really helps with being able to be like, oh, this is what's happening. So be able to address that sense in myself and be like, that's not what's happening right now, but also like with techniques and exercises that we'll get into later. So this is kind of a long preamble. I don't know if this was like helpful or interesting. Hopefully it was. But I'm going to read. So the basics of this hub are simple paradoxes that on the surface are relatively straightforward, but under examination go deep: speaking and listening, truth and lies, and sound and silence. That's it. Okay, so about 80% of people experience glossophobia. 80% of people, fear of public speaking. Several intersecting fears are cited as contributing to this, such as a fear of being exposed as incompetent, causing oneself embarrassment, or being judged for making a mistake. Many people tend to be quieter with people they don't know and louder with family, friends, and trusted colleagues. Considering that we tend to speak freely with people who make us feel safe and that we protect ourselves in unfamiliar situations, standing in front of an audience can be unsettling. It's worth noting that when it comes to public speaking, feeling settled and centered, that is, feeling safe within ourselves in the four lower hubs, can change our relationship with external validation and safety. One of the challenges of public speaking is figuring out how to engage and connect with an audience. So the people we click with are on the same wavelength as we are. A study conducted using fMRI scans by UCLA and Dartmouth College showed similar brainwave patterns between people who perceive and respond to the world in the same way. So just a reminder, it showed similar brainwave patterns between people who perceive and respond to the world in the same way. So like-minded listeners and speakers are more likely to become friends. A sense of harmony and amplification of one's beliefs are characteristic of enjoyable communication. So this syncing is attributed to easy transmission of thoughts, feelings, and memories between people and was observed to be a result of brainwave overlap. Conversely, when people are out of sync, the feeling is like dissonant noise and can lead to discomfort and agitation. Yeah, there's stuff that isn't, I don't think, made it into the book, where there's actual like studies about the dissonance and agitation part. So yeah. So rather than change minds, harsh words tend to strengthen people's positions and are more prone to cause folks to defend themselves, to double down on their convictions. Studies have shown that bridging communication gaps is easier when we find some commonalities with the people we disagree with and show we're willing to acknowledge we sometimes make mistakes and get things wrong. Hating other people for their hate will not shift their hate. Bravely speaking up for what you believe in, living with integrity, combined with having respect for others, can change hearts and minds. But your mind needs to be open too. Genuine curiosity is an effective catalyst for bridge building. Try asking, when did you learn to feel that way? When you encounter an opinion you disagree with. People often spend energy trying to convert others instead of investing in the enrichment of their own understanding of another point of view. Talking is about expressing truth and being heard. To be heard, we need to appreciate our audience. And if our audience senses an effort to connect when we're speaking, it's more apt to listen. If we wish to be understood, speaking should involve the use of specific language and analogies that resonate with our intended audience. When we speak to a child or a peer or an elder, we use different slang, speed, volume, and sometimes even different languages. We may attempt to change someone's mind with facts and assertions, but we have a better chance of changing a heart by speaking our truth and giving it a chance to resonate with another person's humanity. If someone is absolutely committed to not believing you, when possible, leave the conversation. There's no better way to teach someone about humanization and boundaries than to enact them. When a person is actively ignoring your perspective or disrespecting what you have to say, whenever it's possible, activate boundaries and create distance. When it's not possible to leave, find a private place and use your hands to form an invisible force field around your body and decide who's allowed in. As a person is addressing you, you can feel yourself safely inside your created space. This sounds kooky. It may sound kooky to try it. It's effective. The importance of this fifth hub boundary is often underappreciated. Invasion by words and loud noise can be dangerous and harmful. So there's a couple things in here. And I understand. Let's see. I think I'm going to get to this, but like there's really something to be said for realizing when someone is really committed to dehumanize you and really moving into like protection of yourself. And there's a couple things I'm going to speak to here. So what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like really like actually forming some sense of like an interest in understanding another person's reality and even being curious about like how could that happen that someone would become this way. What this is discussing is an aspect of vulnerability. So this is about talking that relates to a certain aspect, like to a conversation where it's safe to be relatively vulnerable. Now, what's also being addressed here is that there are certainly interactions where it absolutely is not. There's somebody actively committed to, in their own unconsciousness, wanting to cause you harm, in their own unconsciousness, like to the point that they absolutely have like are operating out of some type of rationalization that's going to vilify you. and or even just their own kind of like reflexive, never-ending vitriol. There are people that just see conflict in every single interaction that they have, and they will create it with you. So they'll create a conflict with you because they're so highly defended that the world feels familiar and safe when they're fighting with you, because it feels probably like a defense. So with these people, what we're trying, there can be a sense of like, I really need them to, the sense of justice and this, that the first line of defense here is protecting yourself. And so what we're talking about here is that it's like, listen, if this person is absolutely, and this can be a just person to person thing, just it can be misogyny, it can be racism, it can be oppression, systems of oppression, classism. I mean, I'm not going to come up with all the examples, but there's just people who just absolutely have a notion of who and what you are that is like really fixed, and because of how they view you, you're just not going to be able to impact them, because they've dehumanized you to the point that anything that you're going to be doing is seen through a view of of someone who whatever they're saying or expressing is like seen through something, it's dehumanized. So with that being said, it's like what we're doing is we're protecting our inner self here. The fact is that this can be a threat. And also, if there's a previous history of these types of dynamics, actually, especially if we're young, being particularly activating, that's going to like actually create a physical sense of being imminently threatened. We may actually be imminently threatened. So there's the aspect of removing yourself. Removing yourself is like item one. It's like, can you get out of a situation like this? And it doesn't need to, it's like, it's either like, are you like physically like, is it, if it like, depending on the level of threat, like how you're leaving. But even in a professional environment where you're just excusing yourself from the situation, like you're just actively removing yourself, because there's just something to be understanding that there are interactions where all it can do is damage you, because the person is intent on seeing you as something that they have no intent of understanding. And if anything, they're getting satisfaction out of reinforcing a belief about you. So the thing about protection is like, when we recognize that this is happening, is to immediately come to a place where it's like, okay, we're in this mode now. So most of the time, so in the cases where we can actually physically leave, and then that kind of is its own thing, which we're not going to get into here. But then if you kind of can't, for whatever reason, this kind of like technique that I'm talking about, which is to create a sort of like sort of a imaginary, it's almost like I hate using that word for this, but it's an invisible force field around your body, like to actually form it. And then almost imagine when the person is talking is like, you're sort of imagining it be like even slightly muffled. That you're like, I'm in a space here. So it's like to really minimize the sense of a physical threat. The other thing too, and I actually did this week, is that I actually like mentally put a person in a plexiglass box who is like really like chaotic and loud, and I made it so like in my visualization of it is that they're in a plexiglass box, and they're kind of directing themselves at me, was muffled. Like all I could do is look at them, and it was like it was zoo-like, where I was like watching somebody, and it was kind of like, oh my gosh. And so every time I started to feel like, oh my God, like activated by the person, I'd like redirect that visual. And this was like after, it was like when I was processing the sort of the situation. So I use that. I mean, I'm not just talking about this theoretically. I use that notion of like creating a protective boundary with myself. So, last paragraph here is dynamic flow between speaking and listening creates health in this hub. If we tend to talk and not listen, we fail to learn new things and wall ourselves off from curiosity and the transformational potential of new information. So I'm going to do a full circle on this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what was in the earlier part of the third paragraph here. But so it's like, yeah, so if we only listen and do not disclose, we're blocking the vulnerability and revelation that is hallmark of connection. Our own comfort with personal disclosure can be like granting permission for others to speak freely. So Virginia Woolf wrote in the years, if you do not tell the truth about yourself, you cannot tell it about other people. So, okay. So we're going to look at both sides of this kind of principle of dehumanization as both recipients of it and perpetrators of it. And the thing is with this, and this is really difficult, especially if we do feel like scared and threatened by, feel whatever, that real like being able to tap into the activation of these feelings and the like somatic experience of it. It's like, how is this physically feeling, and tracing the root there to find those that aspect of very, very likely early experience of feeling unsafe. And that's why the like a somatic practice is particularly impactful, because it's really addressing the feeling, like the reflexive feeling, and the belief system. When we keep talking to the belief system, the reflex keeps arising. So we just keep having to like, so when we're kind of doing a little bit of both, where we're actually experiencing the feelings and the reflexes that are arising, and we're also evaluating the belief system, that between those two things we can begin to like loosen the tangle, so to speak. Now, one of the things is, if we're feeling under threat, it's really likely that it's going to get kind of like ricocheted back, where other people, like we can't see other people. People have opposing viewpoints, even about ourselves. And I think there's something to be said, and I realize this is a tall order for many people. Apparently, most people right now, is to just even have curiosity about, how did you come to feel this way? Because for a lot of people with really limiting, um, rigid viewpoints of other people, that it really comes from, like, kind of oddly enough, like a fourth hub thing, which is about belonging and connection. So, there'll be people that realize that, like, in their families, if they were to have different positions than things that are really important to the family, that would represent like a departure and even like a betrayal. So there, and then like they'd have to deal with the aftermath. So it gets really like locked in, and it creates some, where you have people where, I haven't talked about this yet, but like the fourth hub, with connection and belonging, above that, these are the hubs, the fifth, sixth, and seventh, that for like may not get developed, like, and the ability to have imagination, the ability to like see that, like, people are like, oh, I don't have that. Everybody has that. It's like, it can be developed. The ability to like speak, create. I'm not creative. Everyone's creative. Everyone's creative. And it's like, it can be that you're great at fixing a transmission, You're great at, like cooking and making incredible food. You're great at like drawing pictures. You're great at like writing stories. You're great at solving problems with numbers. You're great at writing code. Everyone is creative. Everyone has this capacity to build worlds into existence. And so that if these upper hubs don't get the chance to be, ultimately developed, we believe that we don't create. We believe that we don't have imagination. We believe that we're not smart. And you are all of these things. And it's just like the need to belong, the need to feel safe interferes with the development of the freedom we feel to express ourselves, the freedom we feel to like see and use our imaginations. And even it interferes with the ability to like process information, which is like everyone's smart. I know it's gonna it's like what you're like. And one of the things too with people in this practice that happens is that the more you open up and like release some of the like kind of stuck energy around kind of fear, around I'll just call it like fear or shame, guilt, whatever. It kind of like that. It takes a lot of energy to hold those notions in the rigidity. And once that opens up, there's a lot more capacity. People have been like, oh my God, I'm like playing music now. I'm writing music now. I'm doing, I had somebody be like, I can't believe it. I have like ideas now at work. I'm somebody who has ideas. I used to look at other people and think, why do they have ideas? And like, I know I'm smart, but I just like, I can't, they just don't come up. Like there's this, that they're just like, yeah, it just feels like something I can't do. So what was that? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So okay. The thing about like where the hubs and are the hubs actually get developed over the fourth hub, like because once belonging, connection become panicked, I guess, in a sense of being afraid of being like left out or alone or whatever, that like what we hide in order to belong winds up impacting what we're willing to express, what we're willing to see, and what we're willing to know. So, so that's stuff that we work on here. And like we're working on this from the sense of physical security, working on emotional, like literacy and attunement, working on a sense of personal power and individuality, working on the sense of belonging that emanates from a relationship we have with ourselves, like how much we like ourselves, and that's like, by the way, like you really like yourself. It's underneath everything, like you really like yourself. So anyhow, that's it for this. There's obviously a lot of nuance in this. If you have the book, page 190, give it a give it a look through, a contemplation. In in part 3, we have techniques and exercises in chapter 11 that are specifically focused on things that have to do with like journaling and the introspection and emotional hygiene of like processing words, really like processing like thoughts and words and expressing things as a form of like practice and like restoring flow and expanding capacity. So there we have it. Thank you so much for coming along for this. It means so much to me. I want to say that it means so much to me that that like this is something that we're in this together, and I really do I really look forward to this as a conversation and an exchange, because right now it really does feel like kind of like speaking from the kind of like, because I'm just talking to myself. I'm really, really looking forward to this as hearing what you have to say about your thoughts and your experiences with this. And it's like how enriching it is to hear what this is like for you, and what is like, how like the evocativeness of like what memories you have, or even like your sense of what these topics mean. And like, and either like even like disagreement, I like where it's kind of like, no, I see it this way, or this is another thing, or this is something that I don't think is in here. Love this. And I'm really looking forward to the day, and it will come where this is a discussion that we're having together. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say. In the meantime, if you have any comments, please, I answer every comment. And even to the point that if you have a specific question, I will make a special installment for you. Thank you, Mira. Like, yeah. So thank you. So yeah, any specific questions, I'll address either if the comment come in real time, I'd address it right now. But if it comes in afterwards, I'll just do a separate stream on it. And so again, I love you. I'm so grateful for you. It's just means so much to me that we're doing this together. So looking forward to the next time where we'll do hearing and listening. All right. I hope you have a really good rest of your day. All right. Bye.